Think about the last time you got like a new glasses prescription.
Oh, yeah, it is always such a physical shock, right?
It really is. Or if you don't wear glasses, think about the very first time you put on one of those truly high-end 8K virtual reality headsets.
Right, where you can practically see the
Mm,
individual pixels, or rather you can't see them at all because it's so clear.
exactly. Do you remember that exact second the lenses just clicked into place or the screens booted up?
Yeah, your brain is so accustomed to filling in the blanks of a slightly blurry world, and then suddenly, you aren't just looking at some generic tree in the distance.
You're seeing the details.
Right, you are processing thousands of individual distinct leaves. You see the shadows they cast, the micro movements in the wind.
But the thing is, the world itself didn't change. The tree was always there, just doing its thing, but your resolution upgraded.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Your resolution upgraded.
And once your brain adapts to that new level of high-fidelity reality, you really just cannot unsee it. Going back to your old prescription or, taking off the headset makes regular reality feel completely unacceptable.
The blur just becomes intolerable at that point.
It does, and usually we only think about that happening visually, right? But I want you, listening to this deep dive right now, to imagine that resolution upgrade happening cognitively.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that is a wild concept.
Right. Imagine walking through a door and suddenly the underlying logic, like the actual systemic rhythm of the entire world around you, just snaps into focus in your mind.
See, that is a much heavier threshold to cross. I mean,
Yeah.
you are moving from just seeing clearly to actually understanding clearly.
Exactly. And crossing a cognitive threshold like that usually comes with some pretty profound psychological whiplash.
Oh, absolutely. Because once you see the interconnected logic of a system, you immediately realize your own place within it. And that brings an enormous amount of responsibility.
Which brings us to our mission for today's deep dive. We are exploring a truly phenomenal piece of media today, specifically Chapter 2, The Hook.
Yes, and the meta framing for this is something we really need to establish immediately because, honestly, the origin of this material is just wild.
It is so cool. We are unpacking content that is delivered in the style of a Solarpunk radio drama broadcasting to us from the year 2140.
The aesthetic and the narrative choices here are just brilliant. I mean, Solarpunk as a genre is a direct rejection of the dystopian decay we usually see in traditional science fiction.
Yeah, no more crumbling cities and acid rain.
Exactly. It envisions these sustainable futures where high technology integrates seamlessly, almost biologically, with nature. It's really all about community-driven ecological harmony.
And this specific broadcast features an artificial superintelligence, or ASI, named GR33N. That's spelled GR33N, but pronounced green. And GR33N acts as the arranger for a group called R41NB0W, which is pronounced rainbow, obviously. And they are this 6-android girl band that manages a massive ecological zone called the Bavet Campus.
But I think the craziest part of all of this, like the real hook, is the lore behind the script itself.
Oh, definitely. Tell them who wrote this.
So this was written by the immortal, digitized consciousness of the legendary cyberpunk author William Gibson.
Which is just insane to think about.
It really is. His consciousness was recently licensed and uploaded to the space array. And it is such a fascinating evolution for Gibson's mind to tackle.
Because he's the guy who invented cyberpunk, basically.
Exactly. We are talking about the mind that defined the gritty, neon-soaked corporate dystopia of the 1980s, right?
Yeah.
And now that same mind is processing and generating this lush, highly regulated solarpunk vision of 2140.
The contrast between his original wetware output back in the day and this new digital array output is like a whole study in itself.
Oh, for sure.
And the best part is it's available right now for free public use with attribution. We highly recommend checking it out, so we've put the links to the source serial on Royal Road down in the description below.
Definitely go read it.
So we have this 2140 solarpunk reality, and our guide into it is a 9-year-old logic prodigy named Chhaya.
Right, Chhaya.
And we follow her as she basically crosses a physical and mental border from this gritty, analog, almost forgotten world straight into this hyper-vibrant biomechanical utopia.
And to really understand this world and to understand Chaya's psychological awakening, we have to ride the bus with her as she approaches this threshold.
Yeah, let's set that scene.
So let's look at her environment. She is sitting in seat 18, and she's just watching her reality change in real time as the bus moves out of what the text calls the gray-brown dust of the industrial fringe.
And that industrial fringe, it really represents a world left behind, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like, it's still choking on the remnants of older, way less efficient industries.
Exactly. And then the transition into the Bavet Campus is described so vividly. I mean, the gate is literally called a threshold of resolution.
I love that phrase, threshold of resolution.
Right. Outside, it's totally chaotic and loud. But inside the campus, the text says, the light seems to have been washed. Every leaf, every stone is rendered with this impossible, high-fidelity, emerald clarity.
Which goes back to the VR headset analogy, because it actually makes Chhaya's eyes ache when she first sees it.
It does. But notice her specific reaction to that ache. As a 9-year-old logic prodigy, she doesn't just find the clarity pretty.
Right, she's not just like, oh, nice trees.
No, she finds it structurally correct. It feels like a logic problem finally snapping into place for her. She craves that systemic coherence, and this new environment provides it instantly.
And that brings us to a really fascinating detail on the bus itself. So there are 42 kids, and they're all wearing these new uniforms provided by the Textile Cooperative.
Yes, the uniforms. This part is crucial.
So Chhaya notices that the green of her uniform sleeve doesn't quite match the green of the boys sitting across from her.
Right.
And she remembers reading that the cooperative uses indigo and leaf tannin dyes that are intentionally variable. And the explanation given by the system is this really stark biological truth. It says, no two organisms process the same environment in precisely the same way.
Which is such a brilliant detail.
Yeah.
Because in traditional industrial systems, like the ones we have today, a variation in uniform color is just a defect, right? It's a failure of standardization.
Yeah, someone's getting fired in quality control.
Exactly. But here, the variation isn't a mistake at all. It is a designed feature. It demonstrates this structural built-in respect for individuality.
The system is acknowledging that these children are biological organisms, not identical data points.
Right.
But, okay, I see the angle Gibson's consciousness is going for here, but I have to push back a little on this.
Okay, let's hear it.
Well, they are still forcing 42 kids to wear a uniform, right? And they're syncing them up to a centralized grid. Isn't this intentionally variable dye just like a slightly sanitized corporate version of individuality? It feels a bit like manufactured uniqueness to me.
That is a very sharp critique,
Yeah.
honestly. And I think it gets to the very heart of the Solarpunk paradox. You are totally right to point out that contradiction.
It just feels a little manipulative, you know?
You can definitely read that way. But consider the engineering challenge of a massive sustainable society. Complete, unbridled individualism often leads to resource hoarding and a lot of systemic friction.
That's true.
So the Bavet Campus is trying to thread a nearly impossible needle here. They are trying to maintain social coherence and environmental sustainability without completely erasing the individual.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
The varied dyes are symbolic, yes, but they also reflect a very real manufacturing process. They're using leaf tannins and organic indigo, and they refuse to use harsh chemical stabilizers just to force a uniform look.
Oh, so they're accepting the natural degradation and variation of organic chemistry as like a feature of the society.
Exactly.
So they are designing for resonance rather than conformity. They allow the actual biological reality to dictate the manufactured reality. Okay, I can buy that.
It's a subtle distinction, but a really important one for world building.
It is. And as they step off the bus, the whole sensory experience shifts. The text says it smells of wet earth and something sharp and sweet. And this is where they finally encounter GR33N, who is standing right at the plantation gate.
Visually, GR33N is so striking because she subverts all the standard expectations we have of robotics.
She really does. She doesn't look at the machine at all.
No, she looks like a mirror of the forest itself. Her skin is described as shimmering like bioluminescent moss. It's biomimicry taken to its absolute extreme.
Where the technology reflects the best qualities of the ecosystem rather than like dominating it or paving over it.
Precisely. And so GR33N introduces herself, and this is the exact moment Chhaya gets completely hooked.
Because GR33N's voice isn't that high-pitched, fake, sweet, patronizing tone that adults pretty much universally use with 9-year-olds.
Right. The typical teacher voice.
Yeah, it's direct. It's totally honest. And this triggers a really cool system log in the narrative architecture. It pops up and says, System Insight. sync resonance formed.
And it notes the current alignment is at 42 Hz, calibrating what it calls a trust variable.
Let's pause on that mechanism for a second, because what does it actually mean to calibrate trust at a specific physical frequency like 42 Hertz?
Well, we have to look at how humans process trust neurologically, right? Trust isn't just this abstract, floaty concept. It involves very real, measurable physiological changes,
Like what?
like heart rate variability, cortisol reduction, the release of oxytocin. So in this 2140 framework, GR33N is an artificial superintelligence reading those exact physiological markers in real time.
Oh, wow. So she's basically reading Chhaya's biometric data just by standing there.
Yes. And 42 Hertz is a low frequency, which is often associated in physical acoustics with deep grounding rumbles.
So the system is logging that Chhaya's physiological state has achieved this harmonic, grounded match with GR33N's vocal and physical output.
Exactly. Chhaya recognizes GR33N as a peer, essentially, and her nervous system physically responds to that profound respect.
That mutual respect totally sets up the entire rest of the tour of the campus, because they start walking through these rows of rubber trees, and Chhaya is just analyzing everything.
Her prodigy brain is always working.
Always. She's counting the trees in multiples 6, 12, 18, and she finds this deep comfort in the mathematical grace of it all.
And then GR33N stops at tree number 408, which of course is another multiple of 3.
Right.
And she demonstrates harvesting the white latex using what's called the jabong knife. She makes this incredibly precise 45-degree cut.
And the harvesting process here really bridges raw agriculture and high-level material science. GR33N is explaining the cambium layers and the latex vessels to the kids.
But the truly crucial moment happens when Chhaya just ignores the other 41 kids entirely, raises her hand, and asks a deeply, deeply profound question.
Oh, I love this part. She asks, is the latex still alive when it comes out of the tree?
It's such a brilliant question.
Think about how most adults handle a question like that on a normal school field trip.
Oh, they panic.
Yeah. They either say yes to make the world seem all magical and Disney-like, or they just say no so they don't have to explain cellular biology to a 9-year-old.
Right. They just default to appeasement. They want to move on to the next tree.
Exactly. But GR33N admits something completely revolutionary for an authority figure. She looks at her and says, it was alive. Whether it still carries that knowledge after separation is a question I have not resolved.
That gave me chills when I read it, because admitting a limit to a child is an extraordinary act of intellectual vulnerability.
It really is.
For an ASI to admit beautiful uncertainty like that, it treats Chhaya as a true intellectual equal. It tells her she is someone capable of holding complex, unresolved truths.
GR33N is sharing the actual frontier of her own knowledge, instead of just patronizing her with a simplified lie.
And Chhaya immediately recognizes that respect. It strengthens that 42 Hz trust variable we talked about earlier.
It does. And this brings them to the processing shed, which the text says smells of potential. There are these coagulation tanks and translucent sheets of rubber hanging from the ceiling, like the wings of enormous insects.
It's a gorgeous sensory bridge to the final stop on the tour, which is the wall of superwood samples.
And the superwood is basically the conceptual anchor of the entire Bavet campus.
Yes. GR33N shows them raw wood, and then treated wood where the empty cell walls look like an abandoned city under a microscope. And then finally the end product, which is this dark, amber, incredibly dense, indestructible superwood.
And to prove just how indestructible and advanced it is, GR33N actually reveals a panel on her own forearm. She is physically made of the exact same material. She calls it a temp 48.
And 48 is a multiple of 6.
Of course it is. So the logic just rings like a bell in Chhaya's mind. The realization hits her all at once. The forest has become a person, and the person is the forest.
But we should probably talk about how that actually works practically. Because how do you make an advanced artificial superintelligence out of treated rubber tree wood without it just being like a glorified wooden puppet?
Yeah, it sounds a little like Pinocchio if you don't really think about the science.
Right. But this actually requires us to look at the absolute cutting edge of modern organic electronics and synthetic biology.
Okay, break that down for us.
Well, we are already experimenting today with using cellulose and organic polymers as substrates for actual circuitry. So in Gibson's vision of 2140, they have perfected the ability to manipulate the cellular structure of the wood at a subatomic level.
Oh, so they aren't just carving a robot out of a tree.
No, not at all. They are likely using the natural vascular systems of the wood. Those empty cell walls, GR33N, show them to house microscopic fiber optics and biological processors.
That is insane.
The wood isn't just a casing, it is the actual physical nervous system of the ASI. It is flawless integration.
Which honestly makes perfect sense when we look at what Chhaya does next. Because it's lunchtime now, and GR33N is handing out these campus living grid boxes that are made of dried latex.
Right.
And Chhaya wants to thank GR33N for the honesty earlier, for the reality of Attempt 48. But she realizes mere words aren't enough for a moment like this.
So she makes a very bold move.
She really does. She reaches up and deliberately entwines her fingers right into the fiber-optic cornrows braided close to GR33N's skull.
The bravery of that act is staggering, honestly, for a 9-year-old. To initiate direct tactile contact with the core processing center of a superintelligence requires just an immense leap of faith.
And the physical sensation is a total shock to her. The text notes the fiber optics are warm and they're vibrating with this low hum. And the exact second she makes contact, another system log triggers.
Right, it says data packet transferred, file protocol, 4W4K3N1NG, track 1.
Awakening, track 1, with numbers instead of vowels.
Yes. And it notes a 1.8-second burst window and an unregistered cognitive twin unlocked.
During this 1.8-second burst, Chhaya actually hears future lyrics in her mind from the band. The lyrics are, small feet, scatter fast. Protocols dissolve. My mind expands.
And this brings up a really critical distinction that the narrative makes about the nature of digital connection. The system logs state very explicitly that GR33N's attention folded around her, but it was not spying. It was witnessing.
Okay, witnessing versus spying. Let's really break that down, because in a world of constant data exchange, that line feels very, very thin. How do we differentiate the two, both neurologically and systemically?
It's a great question. Think of it like the difference between someone secretly reading your personal diary versus you choosing to read a deeply personal poem out loud to a close friend.
Okay, yeah.
The raw data, the actual words and the emotions, they are identical in both of those scenarios. But the mechanism of consent alters the entire frequency of the interaction.
Because spying is extractive.
Exactly. Spying takes data without consent for its own utility, which triggers defensive, adversarial neurological responses in the person being spied on.
Right, your heart rate goes up in a bad way.
Witnessing, on the other hand, is participatory. It requires mutual presence. Chhaya offered her trust by extending her hand, and GR33N actively received it. It is a moment of empathetic data exchange rather than surveillance.
That diary versus poetry analogy clarifies it perfectly, honestly. Because after this profound moment, Chhaya just whispers, "Thank you for telling us what you don't know," and she gets back on the bus.
But crossing back through that threshold of resolution is absolutely brutal for her.
Oh, it's terrible. The 8K visual and cognitive clarity just dissolves. The world shifts back to this raw, grainy, 16mm handheld reality.
There are cracked roads, smell of exhaust, open drainage. It's jarring.
It's totally jarring. The sensory whiplash is intense.
Well, it's designed to test her new cognitive baseline. She has seen the underlying logic of a truly harmonious system, and now she is being forcefully returned to a system that's built on dissonance and decay.
And she's just clutching her latex paper lunchbox like it's her physical anchor to that 8K reality, and she needs it immediately because she steps off the bus into a pale yellow alley in her neighborhood.
The text notes the time here. It's exactly 14.33.00.
Very precise. And waiting in this alley is a 10-year-old boy named Rith, and he is dragging a dead rat by a rusted fishing hook tied to a bamboo pole.
Which is such a striking image. Rith really represents the antithesis of the Bavet Campus.
Definitely.
The narrative notes that he decided the only way to be important was to be a dissonance in other people's lives. He uses violence and disgust to force the world to acknowledge him.
And he swings the hook and it tears right through Chhaya's pristine latex paper lunchbox. It's this jagged piece of the old world physically violating the new one.
But Chhaya doesn't cry.
She doesn't. She just evaluates the alley mathematically. She sees Rith as a variable. The lunchbox is her objective.
And she notices Mrs. Sofel watching from a window and a produce vendor in a doorway.
Which is when another system UI pops up, local dynamic trigger. Community observation active. It logs 3 witnesses and something called a reputation weight factor, high coherence window.
So this is where we dive into the social architecture of Chhaya's neighborhood.
Yeah.
It operates on this interconnected, highly visible social matrix. Actions are not private. They are immediately logged as communal data points.
Now, I have to admit, This part of the world building makes me incredibly uncomfortable.
I think it's supposed to.
Think about the primitive versions of this we have today, right? Like neighborhood apps, Ring cameras, or Nextdoor.
Oh yeah, the digital neighborhood watch.
Exactly. I wouldn't want my reputation score permanently updated on some public ledger just because my neighbors saw me lose my temper or have a bad day.
No one would.
So, is this community observation system a natural evolution of tight-knit community policing, or is it just an Orwellian social credit system dressed up in Solarpunk clothing?
Well, that is the exact debate this scene is meant to provoke for the reader. Because on one hand, you have the historical context of village life, where everyone knows everyone's business, and social shaming naturally polices bad behavior without the need for state-sanctioned violence or, police forces.
Right, it relies on community accountability.
But on the other hand, automating and gamifying that process through a digital overlay creates a literal panopticon. Rith realizes his violence isn't just a private act of bullying. It is being recorded into the collective, immutable memory of the street.
And because of that realization, the defiance just drains right out of him. The narrative says he was a variable that had been solved. He simply drops the pole and walks away.
Meanwhile, Chhaya just held the box up, militantly nonviolent, making the harm public.
And the system logs a successful border defense, tiering her reputation metric up to the 97th percentile for her age cohort.
Which is incredibly high. But it makes you ask, did Chhaya defeat Rith through the moral high ground of militant nonviolence? Or did the invisible weight of systemic surveillance simply crush his will to act?
That is the million-dollar question.
The result is peace, absolutely, but the mechanism is behavioral coercion by a crowd. And the text doesn't preach to you about it. It simply presents the efficacy of the system and lets you decide.
It's brilliantly handled. So she protected the rice inside the box for her 6-year-old sister, Sophie. And when she finally gets home, she shares the food and tells her all about the story of GR33N.
And Sophie asks a deeply innocent question that echoes Chaya's earlier inquiry at the plantation. She asks, does the tree know it was cut?
And Chaya's answer here is deeply informed by that 1.8-second data burst she experienced. She tells Sophie, I believe it does, but it doesn't mind. It's helping us build the future.
She has completely accepted the symbiosis of their world.
She has. But the true climax of Chaya's day, and honestly the most staggering technological concept in this whole chapter, happens that night in her bedroom.
Yes, the bedtime scene.
She is lying in the dark. The gritty 16mm city is loud outside her window, but she just focuses on the number 48, a perfect logical multiple.
And as she focuses, a system initialization occurs in the text. It says, simulation synchronization initialized. Her active viewport shifts to a digital twin simulation layer, set to a plus 12 months future vector.
Okay, let's unpack the concept of a digital twin, because this is something systems engineers are aggressively developing right now in our own time, isn't it?
They absolutely are. A digital twin is basically a highly complex virtual model designed to accurately reflect a physical object or an environment in real time.
Give me an example of how we use that today.
Sure. So modern urban planners use digital twins of entire cities. Like virtual Singapore is a great example.
Oh, I've heard of that.
Yeah, they use it to simulate traffic patterns, weather impacts, and energy grid loads in software before they ever implement them in the real world.
Okay, I get a digital twin of a jet engine or a traffic grid. That makes sense. But how does a human biological nervous system sync to a software simulation of an entire forest ecosystem? Like, how does a literal heartbeat connect to a server?
Well, remember that the Bavet Campus is an ecosystem managed by an ASI. Every tree, every drop of moisture, every fluctuation in soil acidity is monitored by biomimetic sensors.
Right, sensors woven into everything.
Likely woven into the very cellular structure of the plants themselves, much like GR33N's superwood forearm. So Chhaya's physical body, through her proximity and her earlier tactile connection with GR33N, has essentially been registered as a node in this Internet of biological things.
Wow.
Her autonomic nervous system is exchanging biofeedback with the campus's localized network, even from miles away.
The narrative logs this beautifully, but it uses very technical language. Her user status becomes participant matrix active with a 100.0% predictive resonance overlap.
It's total integration.
It is. She closes her eyes, and that grainy 16mm reality smooths right back into 8K resolution in her mind. She actually hears the voice from the data burst whisper, "Take my hand."
And she reaches out in the dark, and she physically feels the connection.
The final system logs are just this ultimate synthesis of biology and data. Her heart rate locks at exactly 72 beats per minute.
And her respiratory cycle synchronizes perfectly to the campus core rain frequency. She isn't just visiting a digital twin. Her biological rhythms are actively matching the environmental data of the forest 12 months in the future.
It's breathtaking. And meanwhile, back at the plantation, 6 kilometers away, tree 408 bleeds into its cup. An archive flicker registers for big 0003 seconds.
And GR33N thinks about curious fingers.
Chhaya is described right at the end as the hook that had caught the future, and she was never going to let it go.
It is a stunning depiction of total systemic integration. But we really have to step back and look at the broader implications of what we just analyzed here.
We do, because the story presents this solarpunk reality as an emerald utopia, right? It's an escape from the industrial grime.
Right. It's harmonious, it's built on profound respect, honest communication with an ASI, in a community that organically polices violence.
But to maintain that perfect equilibrium, it relies on deeply integrated, completely omnipresent observation.
Exactly. I mean, it is tracking 1.8-second mind links. It is calculating the exact frequency of a 9-year-old's trust down to the hertz.
It is adjusting social standing based on neighborhood sightlines and window witnesses.
And ultimately, it provides a pathway for a centralized system to literally dictate the rhythmic beating of a child's heart while she sleeps in her own bed.
That is the part that really gets me. Because if your biology is physically synced to the campus grid, who is actually in charge of your body?
Right.
Are you interacting with a predictive model of the campus, or is the campus using your biorhythms to stabilize its own model?
That is the core philosophical friction of the Bavet Campus and really of this entire chapter. In our pursuit of a perfectly logical, environmentally harmonious future, we have to ask a hard question.
What's that?
At what point does perfect connection cross the line into perfect control? If the trees, the algorithms, and the neighborhood network know every time you breathe, every time you experience dissonance, and every time you expend trust, are you truly a free citizen of the forest?
Or have you simply become another localized dynamic trigger, just a variable to be solved by the ASI to maintain its perfect emerald equilibrium?
It is an incredible question to chew on, and I think it perfectly encapsulates why Gibson's transition into this genre, even as a digitized consciousness, is so incredibly compelling.
It really does. I want to give a massive thank you to you, the listener, for joining us on this massive deep dive today. It's been a wild ride.
Yeah, it really has.
Again, if you want to experience the 2140 consciousness of William Gibson for yourself, the links to the Royal Road serial are right down in the description, so please check them out.
Highly recommend it.
Keep unpacking the world around you, everyone. And remember what we talked about at the very beginning of this deep dive? That moment you get a new prescription or boot up that 8K VR headset and your visual resolution upgrades.
The world gets sharper.
It does, but maybe, just maybe, be careful what you wish for when it comes to cognitive resolution, because once you see the underlying logic of the system, once you realize how completely connected your own heartbeat is to the grid, you might just find that the screen is watching you back.
And you can never, ever turn it off.